Studies have shown that testosterone has fallen 25% in the last couple decades, and sperm count has almost reduced down to 60% over the last few decades as well. And more men are becoming infertile at ages that they really shouldn't be. So what is the reason for this, and how do we fix it? One of these reasons is estrogenics. These are artificial, often toxic, fake estrogens that enter our body, whether it be through touch, consumption, or through inhalation. Unfortunately, it's very easy for it to enter our system, and when it gets there, it can cause really bad damage. So how they work is there's an estrogenic receptor, and we've pretty much got one of these in every part of our body. Naturally, what would happen is you would have an estrogen hormone that would kind of enter the receptor, then the receptor would start the process of developing something that is estrogenic in that part of your body. For example, with men, if we have a lot of estrogenic receptors that are being stimulated by these estrogens around our chest area, it can develop into gynecomastia and things like that. Gynecomastia being man boobs, basically. Now, what estrogenics do is they act as this estrogen that is stimulating the estrogenic receptor. So even if you might have a lower count of estrogens, it's still being stimulated by the estrogenics, which can cause for all sorts of hormonal disruptions and things developing in our body that we don't want. Here's one example of how estrogenics have affected other animals. So there's one group of fish and there's another group of fish in this study. This group is being treated to a short burst of a very low dosage of EE2. Now, EE2 is the birth control contraceptive pill. They are being treated to 10 nanograms per litre, which is a very low dosage. This group is being treated to 5 nanograms per deciliter, but this time it's for their whole lifespan. Compared to normal fish, this group that was only exposed for a short amount of time actually found that their fertility was diminished by 50%. That means when they were expected to have 10 kids, they actually had 5. What's worse is this group here that was actually only exposed to 50% of what that group was exposed to, but this time over a much longer period of time, was actually completely infertile. They had a complete population collapse. There was no offspring at all. We have around 0.5 to 1 nanograms per litre in our waterways. At least this is in the UK, which is actually quite a low amount. When you go over to the US and you go over to China, their levels are much higher. But these levels in England, which is 1 nanograms per litre, is a third of what caused the entire population collapse of this group in this study. And this is only because a lot of our wastewater treatment plants just don't have the technology in order to take this out, and they instead just dump it into the nearest lake. This also isn't something that's just been noticed by scientists. Many fishermen around the area have been reporting that they've been catching fish that have been deformed, whether it be through feminization or whether it be through some other kind of way of estrogen affecting the way that it's been developed. Now, I'm not saying humanity is over. We have to think about the fact that these fish are exposed to this 24/7 because they live in the water, whereas we only drink a fraction of it in our tap water because it is filtered out into our tap water to an extent, although the amount that we have isn't really clear. There's not a lot of numbers on how much is in the UK tap water. And we are a bigger animal, so I think it would be correct to think that we would need a lot more than these fishes do to have a complete societal collapse. But having this level of toxicity in the environment and having this level of estrogenics in our everyday environment would lead us to believe that it would at least have some impact on the infertility crisis that we're experiencing at the minute. And this is only one of the top 10 estrogenics to look out for. And in this video, I'll be showing how we can replace these estrogenic toxins so we can make our everyday environment that little more healthier. And in this video, I'll be listing the things that we need to replace or completely remove in order to keep our sexual health intact. First of all, I must say that I'm not perfect either. I'm making this video because I recently read Estrogeneration. I think it's a really good book. It's very informative. But I can't lie, looking back a number of years, but looking back maybe like 4 years or 5 years, I was exposed to these quite heavily. There's a lot of things that I would just never do now, knowing this knowledge and knowing that these things really aren't that good for you. For example, I would often drink out of plastic bottles, which is fine if you're like in London, let's say, and you've bought a plastic bottle of water. It's like, man, that's fine. But I would keep plastic bottles in the kitchen, then fill them back up, which is just completely nonsensical. Now instead I have a stainless steel water bottle, for example. or I was doing meal preps and I was putting them all in plastic containers and then heating them up in the microwave, which is so bad because when BPA is heated up, it starts to almost crack and damage and it leaks into the food itself. BPA is a toxin and is also an estrogenic chemical. I used to eat nutrient-starved fast food, and I used to store my oils in plastics, which is also another absolute no-go. I used to work at a mainstream retail store, and I have no doubt that the receipts that I were giving out were just full to the brim with BPA. Something that is so bad that even the government has taken a stance against it and made that illegal. And even though that's illegal, it's still not good enough, which is something that I'll get on in a few videos' time. I'm happy you're taking the time to watch this. I'm not saying that this is going to completely solve the entire infertility crisis and that you're going to become some kind of testosterone god now that you've gotten these things out of your environment, but I think it is really important to look at. And it will have an impact on your current and future health as well, and I'm really happy that there's an audience for this stuff. I'm not going to go fully in depth in this video. I'm not going to go fully in depth in this video. That video will be in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time. But as a general rule, these are the 10 estrogenics that you need to look out for. Phytoestrogens, which are soy and flax. Mycoestrogens, which is a toxic mold that can grow on grains and can often be found in things like cereal, especially in America. APEs, which are potent endocrine APEs, which are potent endocrine disruptors, which means that they mess around with your sexual hormone health. BPA, which is obviously the plastic that has been shown to be extremely toxic, especially towards the functioning of our hormones and testicular function, including fertility. Phthalates, which is a BPA additive, which is almost just as bad. Food dyes such as Red 3 and Red 40, which are seriously powerful estrogenics and can cause ADHD in children as well. Parabens, again, another endocrine disruptor that is very common in our environment that also contributes to infertility. Herbicides, again, another very potent estrogenic substance, which is believed to be a huge cause for infertility at the minute. Tap water, because it can often include things like herbicides or like EE2, as I mentioned earlier. BP and 4-MBC from sunscreens. Now, these are estrogenic chemicals that actually operate in a very specific way, but how they operate is when they are attached to the estrogen receptor, as I mentioned earlier, instead of just being able to flow straight out. Instead, unfortunately, they can be binded to it by UV light. This means that regardless of how much estrogenics is in your body, it continues to signal to your body to make more estrogenic developments in that part of your body. All of these estrogenics are far too common in our everyday environment. So the author of Estrogeneration, which I've got here, Anthony G.J., puts together 3 plans. He puts together a bronze plan, a silver plan, and a gold plan for estrogenic avoidance. Now, this video is going to be specifically on the bronze plan. I'm saying this because I believe this is the most realistic, unnegotiable, basic plan that anyone can put together. Anyone who doesn't have a lot of time, anyone who doesn't have a lot of money, anyone who doesn't have a lot of knowledge on what to get, this plan is for you. This plan is for all people. So, number 1, we're going to want to avoid ingredients with fen and bens in it. One of the more common ones you're going to see is sodium benzoate, which is seemingly in almost every product. Now that you can try and avoid, but anything else with bens, just make sure that you don't have it in, because bens is the sunscreen estrogenic. It's the same one that's in there. And fen is also just another name for an APE, which I mentioned earlier. Eliminate fragrances that just have perfume on the ingredients, or parfum or fragrance or whatever. I think usually in Europe it's parfum. Eliminate this in both personal care products and also in laundry detergent and the like, because as I said before, these can contain APEs, parabens, phthalates, loads of things that unfortunately, because they can just put it down as perfume, they don't have to put on the label. One thing about this I will say is, if you genuinely believe in a brand and if you think that they wouldn't do such a thing, then I think that's fair dues. I have a few perfumes over there that I do use from brands that I trust. Use estrogenic free zinc sunscreen. So this would be a sunscreen without BP and the 4-MBC. So it would be APE-free and paraben-free. And you want it with zinc as well because it's not very irritable to your skin. Completely eliminate red food dyes. Just cut them out. There's no reason why you need red food dyes in your diet. They don't come naturally from whole foods. They'll just be from like some really bad sweet treats. Diminish dietary grains. So like, for example, as we mentioned earlier, the fungus estrogenics are often on grains, specifically on things like barley and soy and the like, so like rye, buckwheat. I would still recommend cutting down on rice a little bit because something tells me that it will also be on there. Doesn't mean you have to get rid of all of them, that's for sure, but instead maybe go for some sweet potatoes or potatoes, things like that. Only eat organic corn products. This is again because of the fungus estrogen that really loves corn for whatever reason. And often corn can be a part of really, really low quality snacks. You're talking about things like, I think, Doritos and like Pringles and stuff like that. There's almost no doubt in my mind that they are more likely to have this than an organic product. Avoid a moldy environment as well. This is again because of the fungus. There's nothing stopping it from also growing in your house. You have things like black mold in the bathroom. You can even have mold on plants. Stuff like that you also need to look out for. Diminish dairy products unless grass-fed and in glass. This is because, for example, if you're going to buy milk, it's super estrogenic and that's only for one, well, it's super estrogenic and that's for two reasons. So number one is that often if it's a low quality milk and it's not grass-fed, they're being fed with grains, usually soy that is just super moldy. So one, the milk is going to be lower quality because they're eating grains. Two, it's going to be even lower and less healthy because they're eating fungus grains, they're eating moldy grains. And three, more often than not, that milk is then put in plastic, which, as we've talked about, is pretty bad, especially since you consider they are in this plastic for so long. Moving over to glass bottles and moving over to grass-fed, get rid of both of these issues. Unfortunately, it's pretty difficult to find a grass-fed milk that's also in a glass, especially in the UK. But if you have a local farm, then definitely go to those. The one that I'm doing now, I think it's Tom Parker's Creamery or something. It's stocked in most supermarkets, and it's the only one that's grass-fed and in glass. Unfortunately, it is vitamin enriched. I don't know why they did that, but it's this one here. Eliminate oil stored in plastics. Estrogenics love to store in our fat, and oil is absolutely no exception. The BPA from the plastic will do everything it can to seep into the oils, and then once you consume the oil, whether it be through direct consumption or through cooking, you consume that plastic. Get rid of all oils in plastic and replace it with oils in glass. Eliminate plastic sippies, so like sippy cups if you have like a kid. Get rid of them completely. These can often have phthalates in them, they can have BPA in them. These are things that can seriously stunt and disrupt their development. Use all glass or stainless steel coffee makers. Now this is quite a niche one, but what we have to remember is the coffee machine has a lot of estrogenics actually in it already, especially if it's made from plastic. So number one, if it's a cheap coffee, then it can get this fungus on it as well that we mentioned earlier. Two, if it's made from BPA, then the whole thing is going to be seeping into your drink. And especially because number three, obviously, usually a coffee machine makes the coffee hot. And as we mentioned before, if you put something hot in BPA, it actually damages it and starts to break it down and it seeps more into the drink. So make sure your coffee machine is either all steel or all glass. All glass. And in the same vein, eliminate microwaving foods in plastic. I obviously used to do this with meal prep all the time. It doesn't really directly affect the taste, but the plastic does break down and enter the food. Now, doing this once in your life won't make that big of a difference. But if you do it consistently over and over and over and over again, then you're putting yourself at serious risk of experiencing these estrogenic effects. Use estrogenic-free kids' chewable toys. Same thing as I mentioned before with the plastic sippies. It's just not good for their development. Use charcoal filters for your tap water. This way it draws out all of those impurities, including the EE2. Now also it seems a reverse osmosis system can also do a similar job. It's trusted by people who have entered this lifestyle of estrogenic avoidance. So definitely try that, or either the charcoal filter. The author of Estrogeneration actually recommends putting a charcoal filter on your shower or your bath as well. These things here are probably the most negotiable or avoidable of the entire list because it is quite expensive. But if you're in the position to do so, definitely do that. Eliminate oral contraception. Now, obviously, for people like me, it's not really an issue. I never have oral contraception. But for women, they can often be taking it and not realizing how much it's actually damaging their body. Now, obviously, this is an extremely niche point because some people need it. Some people may have had an accident and they need to take it. And to be quite honest, if you're in that kind of position, it would appear that the risk that you would pose not taking it is probably greater than the risk posed of taking it. So I kind of understand this. I think the author put it in the book as in stop taking it over and over and over again if you don't need it. Maybe if you're taking it just for cramps, try and look for other ways of diminishing those cramps. Eliminate soy and soy byproducts. So this is literally if you're having soybeans or if you're having soy sauce, for example. These are things that give a lot of estrogen into our bodies. This is evident even culturally in terms of a lot of menopausal women. They actually take soy because they believe that it kind of replaces the estrogenic effects that they're missing from the actual estrogen that is starting to diminish in their bodies. Avoid cannabis smoke. This is the same thing. It's extremely estrogenic. Eliminate flax. Even more estrogenic than soy, although in terms of flax, it's not really in as much other things as soy is. You don't have like flax protein in your protein bar and the like. You might have flax in your green powder, for example, so take a look at that. But apart from that, it's really as simple as if you use flax, just use something else. Eliminate lavender. Now, lavender is another one that is extremely estrogenic as well, often through essential oils or through candles. Lavender has an estrogenic effect when it's being inhaled or consumed. Eliminate highly processed foods. So often with these highly processed foods, not only do we not know what's in them, we don't know what process they've been through. We don't know how they've been packaged and the like. There's no doubt in my mind that, for example, the McDonald's cows, they've probably been on the soy grains and they're probably just like crap, and it's probably got like red 40 in it or something, you know. It's just how it is. This food is really bad for us. It's toxic in almost every way. So this is quite the list, and I don't expect you to change all of these all at once. And you shouldn't expect that of yourself either. Slowly fade these out and slowly fade in the substitutes. For example, if you have loads of plastic meal prep containers, just buy one glass container, see how you get along with it, then buy another one and then buy another one, and slowly fade out the plastic ones. For example, if you eat a lot of soy, maybe go through the soy that you have and then go for a substitute later on. Go as slow or as fast as you want into this transition into estrogenic avoidance, because that will help you actually stay consistent over the long term, which is when you'll actually start to see those benefits. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you. Like and subscribe if you'd like to. If you wouldn't like to, then that's fine as well. You can just not. Which can cause for all sorts of hormonal